Welcome back to Pod Junction Podcast, where podcasters learn to grow their business. My name is Sadaf Bainan, and beside me is Matt Edmondson.
Good evening.
Or morning.
Just pick any time of the day, it'll be fine. Depending on when you're listening to this, I suppose.
Yeah, I suppose. All right, so today we have Mark Asquith, who is the founder of Captivate. Thank you, Matt. Mark is also known as That British Podcast Guy. You might have heard of him.
That British Podcast Guy?
Yeah, he'll go more into it in the segment. But in this particular episode, you're going to hear how he spotted a game-changing gap in podcasting tech and created Captivate, which is a platform built to make podcasting simpler for creators.
Very good. Is that straight off their website?
No.
Did you make that up?
Ish. I took information from here, there, and everywhere and put it together.
Okay, very good, very good. Captivate, just so you know, is the platform we use for our podcasts. Mm-hmm. So when it comes to podcasting, you've got to host the audio for the podcast somewhere, and we host it on Captivate, and Captivate push it out to all the sites like, I was going to say Shopify. No, Spotify. No. Always get those two mixed up. Why did they have to name them so similar? What's wrong with these people? And Apple Podcasts and all those sorts of things. So there's plenty out there. Who we used in the past? Who did we use before Captivate? Do you remember the name of the? It's totally escaped me. Yeah. They're a really well-known one as well. Libsyn. Let's see if we used in the past. You've got Anchor FM. There's all kinds of people out there. But we do really like Captivate. Yeah. But they're all British. They're terribly British, don't you know? So it's very good to have a British company on. Absolutely. So I'm looking forward to this one. You get to meet Mark. You get to chat to Mark. Very good. Did he teach you about microphone technique by any chance?
No, he didn't. I didn't ask.
Excellent. So we've been having, ladies and gentlemen, this ongoing battle in the studio with trying to figure out how to get Sadaf to use her microphone in the correct manner.
Yes, we're in episode 56
and we are
still going.
Still trying to figure it out. You have this amazing ability. And the problem that we have, and maybe you've got this if you're podcasting as well, the problem that we have is you like to move when you talk.
Yes.
And so you tend to move forwards when you get excited about things. Today we've got Mark Asquith. The microphone stays where it is. So as you move forward, the microphone kind of does this thing where it goes under your chin, which it looks funny on video as it is, but it goes under your chin, and we just get the tones, the sort of the reverb from the throat.
Yeah, sorry about that. But maybe there will be a Christmas miracle. Christmas is coming up. We'll see.
Yes. 'Tis the season for hope, good cheer, and miracles. And Sadaf will learn how to use the microphone accordingly. Just put your hand on it and just move it like that, you know. All right. We need to get it set up better for you maybe as well. Maybe we should get you one of those headset mics.
No.
You know, like the Madonna type mic. No?
No.
That
will cramp my style.
Cramp my style. Oh dear, how does it work? Who knows? Anyway, very warm welcome to you. If this is your first time with us, thanks for joining us. We do love to talk about all things podcasting, especially good mic technique. It's an important thing, apparently, when you're podcasting, to position the microphone in such a way that it does pick up your voice.
Yes.
As we are discovering. But yeah, very warm welcome to you. Make sure you like, subscribe, and do all of those cool things because, you know, I think it's a really good show. I really enjoy doing this show. It's just really funny. Yeah, we just laugh a lot. What was it you said to me? Yeah. No, it's quite often at mine as well, to be fair. What was it you said to me earlier on?
That you embarrassed me on the podcast?
Yeah. And I said, no, I think you do it all by yourself. I don't think you need any help from me sometimes. But yes, it's quite good fun. We do like a bit of banter.
We do.
Keeps it entertaining. So, without further ado, should we listen to Mark and then come back to chatting about Mark?
Yeah.
And what he's got to say? Okay, all right, let me press the button. Here's Mark.
You've been in the podcasting space for over a decade now, and you've seen the industry evolve quite significantly. Could you take us back to where it all began for you? What drew you into podcasting?
Yeah, it's sort of an interesting story. I think one that people relate to that listen to Pod Junction, but I think one one that is very common yet also quite personal, and I think that's a very interesting theme for a lot of podcasters. Anyway, so I was a small business owner. I was a design agency owner, built a design and brand and software agency here in the north of England. Used to do fantastic work for fantastic clients, everything from grassroots businesses right up to multinationals, blue chip companies, people like the Art Directors Club in New York, a lot of multinational stuff. So it was really interesting stuff. But I want to say about 2011, I was starting to get a little bit bored of it. We'd grown to a big enough size where everyone was comfortable. We were earning, fine money. But I was getting a little bit bored. I was getting a little bit, I think frustrated with agency life, always having to pitch for new clients and just this kind of complete hamster wheel constantly, which it was just dull to me. So I was looking for more of a creative outlet. And I'm big into pop culture. If anyone's watching a video version of this or ever seen me on video from here in my home office, you'll see there's loads of memorabilia, Star Wars stuff, DC comic stuff. I'm a big pop culture nerd. So I started writing with a friend of mine, Gary Aylett, about pop culture on a website that we called Two Shots to the Head, and that became a podcast. And from there, I started, I suppose, the classic interview podcast. This is really back in maybe 2013 now. So we'd done the podcast Pop Culture Show for a couple of years, and I started my own interview podcast in business. And it was mainly for two reasons: to kind of help people out in small business, but also to just position myself as a bit of a thinker in small business locally. But what happened was that I very quickly realized that the podcasting, technological elements of podcasting at least, those parts of it were very broken. There wasn't much out there. There was not many hosting platforms out there. Technology was difficult. There's no need for it to be that difficult. So I found myself in an interesting position. I was here in the UK. No one else was into podcasting. That's why I've got that British podcast guy moniker. I used to go and speak at all these events, and I was literally one of the only British people there. And because I was generally the one speaking out of all of us Brits that were there, that became my thing. So I very quickly start to put together sort of solutions for podcasters, web platforms for podcasters. And so on and so forth. And I sort of just got into the industry, got to know everyone in the industry, started working in the industry, built businesses in the industry. And then I think in 2017 I segued out of my agency. We got rid of the agency. I was, like I said, very bored of it. Moved into being a software company through our podcasting technology, and then founded Captivate, the hosting platform that people generally know us for today. Which in turn was then acquired by Global back in 2021. And I still run that. I still, basically do the same job as I did before. So yeah, quite an interesting little tale really, but it's certainly one rooted in small business, which is quite interesting.
Yeah, that is really interesting. And you're right. This is what what Pod Junction is about. So this is perfect. You talked about you wanted to start creating solutions for podcasters. Was that based on your own experience and stuff that you wanted to be able to have at your fingertips to make your podcasting life easier for you? Is that where that came from?
I think that's certainly where we moved to with Captivate. Initially, it was very much around just taking the knowledge that we had and helping. Because actually, let me go back a little bit. Most podcasters back in 2014, 15, when I started making technology here, were either like the entertainment celebrity podcast, Kevin Smith and those people, Joe Rogans of the world, or there was like this massive entrepreneur thing. It was like, oh, if you're a quote unquote entrepreneur, you got to have a podcast. It's quick route to six figures. Absolute rubbish, complete rubbish. But that's what everyone was selling. You had people selling that dream. So I sort of spotted that gap with my co-founder Kieran, and we said, well, wait a minute, most of these people are going to want a way to display that podcast publicly, a way to host it a little bit easier than they've currently got the ability to do in terms of a hosting platform, and to bring everything together in terms of tech stack. So that's what we started doing. So it was, it was to scratch my own itch, but it was more about I'd spotted the opportunity. But then because I became a much more seasoned podcaster really quickly, I'm probably sat here now 10 years, 11 years, 12 years into this, probably done 1,700 podcast episodes, I would guess. I became seasoned quite quickly. And that's when I started seeing things like, oh, actually, maybe we could make the hosting element easier using Captivate. Or maybe now we've got a podcast hosting platform, maybe we could add these features to make my life easier, which in turn would make everyone's life easier. Which is where the brand of Captivate really grew and elevated from, was just, a complete lack of competitor awareness. We just didn't care. We purposely didn't look at other competitors, because otherwise you end up just sort of mimicking them.
Doing whatever they're doing. Yeah.
So it's certainly to scratch my own itch, but to start with, it was very much around the technology space in podcasting just wasn't very good back then.
If that got you curious and you want to catch the full episode, be sure to subscribe to the show. We've got plenty more great conversations coming up.
Welcome back. That's interesting, listening to Mark talk, listening to him talk about the beginnings of Captivate. And I like how he talked about, and this is true for so many companies, how there was a problem, a gap, and he just thought, I'll solve that. And then years later, Captivate is the platform that we use to host our podcast. And so I kind of like that. I like that way of thinking, which says, there's a problem, let's go solve it. Let's make it better. And he talked about how Captivate, it sort of built around this idea of, oh, I'd really like this feature, let's add that. Because that's how we built AMP, which is, it's kind of like an internal platform we use to manage all of our podcasts, because there was nothing out there on the market that kind of did what we needed it to do. And so we were fortunate in the sense that we had a development team that worked in our e-com business. And so we're just like, can we make this? And they were like, sure. Well, it wasn't quite that easy, but in essence, that's what happened, wasn't it? And it's kind of like, what features can we have that we want? How do we use it? Let's develop it. And that becomes just sort of your phase one. And so it's really interesting listening to him talk about that with Captivate, and that's how they did it. And I really like that. How did you find the interview with Mark? It seemed like an interesting chat. Yeah,
it was. There's another. We're going to do another segment with him next week, so you get a bit more insight into that. But he definitely knows what he's talking about. He's been in the game for a long time, hasn't he?
Been there, seen it all.
Yeah, and so it was interesting getting his take on it, and especially like in the next segment as well, we go more into using podcasting as a business tool. So it was good. I agree with what you said, like him spotting that one opportunity. So he had a challenge and he wanted to, figure it out. And he also talked about being a seasoned podcaster. And I think like where you've got, the more you're doing something, you do quickly become seasoned in it. And you do see all the areas that are not quite like, the gaps. And having the mindset to be like, okay, I'm going to figure this out because it's going to make my life easier. Or how did he say it? Like scratch my own itch or something. I think that's a really good mindset to have, because otherwise you're always just working in the parameters that you've been given, and then you don't actually grow. Yeah, no, it's so true. It's a very entrepreneurial mindset. And I think you have to be like that when you're a podcaster. I don't think you have to necessarily be an entrepreneur, but I think you have to have that mindset in the podcast, in your approach to it, which says there are going to be problems. There are things that we're going to face. There are going to be gaps that we kind of figure out. And so I think what did we say earlier on before? You're constantly tweaking. Like you said to me earlier on, I'm going to change the intro to the Pod Junction podcast. It's that constantly tweaking and iterating. Some of them are minor things, like you might tweak the word in the intro or whatever. Some of them are quite major, aren't they, as you go along. But spotting those gaps, spotting how you can make it different, figuring out what it is that you want. And when you look back, what episode did you say we're on? 56. Is that right on the board? Yeah. 50. Jeez, man. So here we are, 56 episodes into it. It looks very different to episode 1, but it's still recognizable. Yeah. If that makes sense. And so having that mindset, which is adaptable, which sees the gaps, and it's just good, I think, every now and again, just to stop and think. And so I guess the thing here for us is, what would we change
about the podcast knowing what we know now, right? So what would we do differently going forward? The format's pretty much stayed the same. So you and me chat, we have a guest on the show.
Yeah.
We take a snippet, we chat about that snippet. And that's evolved a little bit over time, but that's the basic format which stayed the same. Some other things we've changed. But here we are, episode 56. Thinking about going forward, what are some of the things that you'd like to see different about the show? Or is there not anything? Is it perfect?
For me to be able to use the mic, that would be a good starting point.
Yeah, good mic technique.
Yeah. Are you talking just about this?
Yeah,
here?
about pod junction.
Okay. I guess I would extend it out a bit because, like we mentioned before, we're always tweaking it as we go. So it's not like I've got this big, vision at the end of this whatever, and I'm trying to get to that. I'm quite happy where we are right now. But I think from a perspective of listeners, audience, community, I think that I would like to be able to do more, to be able to understand what our listeners like about the show, what they don't like about that, and then being able to make the tweaks that would need to be made in this space. Yeah, I think that's something I would like to change.
Yeah, that's a very key point. I think listening, figuring out what your listeners want, and actually the only if you're listening to this, the only way we know what you want is if you tell us. We don't know who you are. I mean, that's a thing about podcasting; it's quite anonymous. It's not like. Where even it's a bit more tricky now with Facebook, and it's not like you can come to my website and then I can start advertising to you.
Yeah.
And with podcasting, you can listen to the podcast. We have no idea who you are unless you get in touch. And so do that. Do let us know if there's anything you'd like to have different about the show, anything that you think is good, anything is not so good. What would you change? What would you do differently? Because I think this constant tweaking, I think is a good idea, this constant evolution, this entrepreneurial mindset. So thinking about your own podcast then, dear listener, how would you change it? How would you evolve it? Where does it need to go? What are the gaps that you see? Because it's interesting listening to Mark talk. He said, we didn't really care what the competition was doing. We just did our own thing and just got on with it. And when we started Pod Junction, we did the exact opposite we always tell everybody to do, in the sense that we didn't do any research.
Yeah.
At least I don't think we did. We didn't do any research into this. Who's talking about podcasts? Who's doing podcasts about podcasting? What's working? What's not working? Who's got them? Who's built up a good following? Why? Why do people? What's the free? All the stuff that we did.
Yeah, that we tell others
clients to do. We did none of that. Well, I say none of that. We did. There's a chunk of it we didn't do with Pod Junction. We're just like, let's just start.
Yeah.
Because we had so many people that we could talk to, and actually with Pod Junction. One of the key things that we wanted to do was to talk to people like Mark and all the other guests that have been on the show, just to pick their brains about it. Was more for us, I think, in terms of helping us grow in our skills as a podcaster. And so going and talking to other podcasters and picking their brains is easy to do because you just invite them onto a podcast because they're podcasters. They're going to say yes, right? And they're going to tell you all their secrets because that's what podcasters do. And so I think we started it more for us than we did for trying to build an audience. And here we are, episode 56. And so, we get some great people on the show, which is quite lovely. But that I love that, Mark. We were the same. We were just like, start a Pod Junction. I don't care what anyone else is doing. I've never even looked at the download stats for this show.
No, I haven't either. But Matt, I have a question for you.
Okay.
So thinking about our podcast, what is there something that you believe is true, but there's no data to prove it? What do you think? Just a gut feeling, and what would you do about it?
About Pod Junction? That's a really good question. So what do I think is true? I think that I've mentioned this before in the sense that I think it's an unusual format, right? So typically, as Mark talked about in his segment, he started off with your typical interview podcast, which in essence could be a default route for Pod Junction. You talk to these guys, right? So we could say, right, with Pod Junction, every episode we just release a new interview with a new podcaster. So you do the interview with Mark, that's one episode. Whoever is after Mark, that's the next episode.
Yeah.
And that would be the traditional route to go down. And in some respects, it's if you're trying to use podcasting to build a network, it's better because you get to talk to more people, you get to connect with more people. Whereas this way, we get maybe 12, 15 guests on a year, which means in some respects, it's less onerous in getting guests. The issue then becomes, recording these podcasts, which is, I suppose, a little bit easier because it's you and me, we're in the office, we just sit down in front of a microphone in the studio and do it. So I think that the format is a little bit quirky. And that's probably what I believe about Podjunction, in the sense that I think we're quite quirky. Do I have any data to back this up? No. In the sense that there's banter, there's usually either you're laughing at me or I'm laughing at you, or we're both laughing at each other. Either way, there's some laughter going on, which is quite fun. I like the fact that we have a clip from the interview and then we chat about it in the context of our own podcast. So asking you, how would you change Podjunction? I think is an interesting question because I don't know. These are things that I believe. Do I have the data to uphold this? No. I could look at the downloads and I can say, is it growing? I could look at the engagement stats, say on YouTube. Is that growing? Are people listening to longer and longer segments of the show? Where do people normally drop out? I could really get into the weeds, but there's a number of reasons why I haven't. One, I don't think I need to, and that's not an arrogance thing. It's because, again, one of the key reasons for doing Podjunction is because I'm really keen to learn from other podcasters, right? Yeah. If I was doing this purely as a business, like if this was the sole source of my income, then yes, I would look at the data and I would be very on top of that, trying to create the best show, go and get the best sponsors and all that sort of, but I'm also very aware that we have to manage diaries. And, we have a limitation on what we can and can't do. So I've never really got into the data on this particular podcast. Maybe I should really have a look at it. Again, I'm doing all the stuff that I tell people not to do. Or I'm not doing the stuff that I tell people to do is probably a better way to put it. But that would be my long answer to your question. I think it's quite a quirky format, which means in my head it's quite entertaining because I quite enjoy it. I quite look forward to doing these episodes. In fact, there's not a podcast that I don't look forward to, but I do look forward to these because they are different. Yeah. It's like you and me, the only thing that's missing is a coffee, although you've got a plant pot for your water. Let me show this on video. I'm sorry, I've got that's water. Is that warm water as well? Yeah. Jeez. Okay, so
I keep clearing my throat, so I'm hoping that will work.
Yeah.
Help me. But...
Bit of lemon, bit of honey in there.
Yeah.
It'll be helpful. Bit of whiskey. Hot toddy.
That'll make this podcast really interesting.
You snoozing in the corner. But yeah, I've lost complete track. Where were we?
I don't know. Something to do with water.
Something to do with water. But no, I do look forward to these episodes, and I which is why I don't need to get into the data. It's not an arrogance thing. It's the format really works for me, but I don't know if it works for everybody that's listening to the show because I've not looked at the data to back it up.
Yeah, I think if you're using your podcast as a business, as a business tool, you're trying to get clients from it, then I think you have a different outlook on it. Whereas for us, I feel like it's more of a means to an end. Yeah. And so I think we can just kind of have fun along the way and don't have to get into the data as much.
It's actually a beautiful position to be in, isn't it, in many ways? And I'm very grateful for that. And
also the downloads don't really mean a whole lot of anything, really.
No, and they're becoming less and less important.
Yeah.
Which is, let me say that differently. They are an important figure, right? How many people download the podcast? Because you can, if you've got 1,000 this week and 2,000 next week, you can see that your podcast is growing. So it does indicate growth. What it doesn't indicate is listenership. Because I subscribe to, I don't even know how many podcasts, right? And I've mentioned this before, I use a podcast listening app, Snipped, which is great. I really like it. And the way it works for me is once a week, usually on a Friday, I'll open up the podcast app and I'll go down the podcasts, which are downloaded onto my phone. So that's a download. And I
automatic download.
Yeah. And then I will choose which ones of those I'm going to listen to by adding them to my playlist queue, which you can do on Snipped. So you can create a queue of podcasts that I want to listen to, and it will just go down and it will do them. And I can, everything else gets archived, just gets deleted. And it's not that I'm not unsubscribing to the show because I'm genuinely interested in the show. Just that episode.
You just don't have that many hours in the day either.
Yeah, I don't have that many hours, and I've totally decided on the basis of the title whether or not to listen to that show, right? And let me give you a case in point, right? I'll open up my app on my phone. So I'm listening to an episode of Carey Nieuwhof's podcast. He's got Seth Godin on, and they're talking about marketing. And I thought, actually, that's going to be really interesting. But I must have deleted 5 or 6 episodes of Carey's podcast on my phone, archived, before deciding which ones to listen to. So I've got one on here about rediscovering Christmas. One, Are We Sleepwalking into War, which I thought was quite an interesting title. But if I go to on my app, so I've got all of these podcasts here, loads of podcasts. And so Carey's podcast, Secrecy and Exposure in Leadership, How Your Body Keeps Something or Other. I'm just not interested. So I would archive that. Politics one, like British politics, but bigger. I have no idea what that means. I'm archiving that. We've got The Liberty of Obedience. That sounds interesting. Then I've got Dr. Shauna Swan, How to Safeguard Your Hormone Health and Fertility. I'm like, I'm out. And that's the Huberman Lab podcast. But I'm like, yeah, I'm out. I don't even need to see that. Don't know what that's about. Do you see what I mean? So I can scroll down. Modern Wisdom, Sam Morrill, Travis Kelch, OnlyFans and New York Chaos. It's got OnlyFans in there. And genuinely, I'm not interested in OnlyFans, so I'm going to archive that. Liverpool go top, Arsenal and Man City stumble. The Rest is Football podcast. That is definitely going on my playlist just because I'm a big Liverpool fan. So do you see what I mean? This is how I do it. So this is why downloads don't mean a whole great deal. All of those podcasts were downloaded, but I listened to maybe 1 in 4.
But also the ones that you do listen to, there's no data to say when you stop listening to it. So, someone could start listening to this and after 90 seconds decide, no, this isn't for me. And you wouldn't know that.
Yeah. And that happens quite a lot.
Yeah.
And nor do you have any, like with again, the way Snip works, the way Apple podcasts work, is like, take Carey's podcast. I love Carey's podcast. I'd maybe listen to 1 in 5 episodes, right? But I also, I've listened to him for years talk about leadership. But at the same time, I know the first 5 minutes are absolute waffle.
Yeah.
Right? They're all the sponsor breaks, they're all this, that, and the other. So I can just go and straight into that bit, right? And Stimped again makes that easier because you can just swipe. AI just goes, you just swipe through that. So you don't know what bit I listen to. You don't know what bit is engaging. And that's kind of hard data, I think, to get from podcasts. I dare say Mark will tell me that's going to change at some point. And that would be useful data. But again, you don't know. It's not like YouTube. You can go to the YouTube video and see when people dropped out, average retention rates and stuff like that. It doesn't work as well, which is why I'm really intrigued about YouTube as a podcast platform. So Google Podcast, I don't think is around anymore, but YouTube they were trying to promote podcasts through their platform. Whether that actually takes off or not, I don't know. But it'd be really interesting, just again, because of the data that they give you. Yeah. But can I just say a big shout out to Mark for coming on the show. And if you are looking for a podcast platform, then do check out Captivate.fm. We genuinely like it. All our podcasts are now on, just scrolling through all the podcasts in my head. Yes, we've moved them all onto Captivate.fm. The way we do it is we use Captivate FM and YouTube. So we put the videos on YouTube and then you can get podcasts through YouTube or Captivate FM. And either way works for us, but we do really like Captivate. There are some really great features on there. There's lots of features that we don't use. Mainly because we're probably not good at head around them.
Well, I think the other thing is we've used it primarily as a hosting platform.
Yeah.
And it's so much more than that.
Yeah, it is. It really is. So... yeah, do check it out. Go have a look if you're looking for a podcast hosting platform, because we're just going to give it a bit of love. Like I say, there are other podcast platforms out there. And maybe we'll get some of those guys on the show as well at some point. But good to start with Mark, CEO of Captivate FM, our favorite hosting podcast platform. And they don't sponsor the show. But Mark, if you wanted to, feel the freedom. We can put one of those sponsor sections at the start of the podcast that everyone fast forwards. It's like that, because that's going to work really well. So maybe we should talk about that in a separate podcast. But no, I really enjoyed that. Thanks, Mark, for coming on. Makes you think again about the podcast. What's working, what's not working. Find the spots, the gaps. Tweak it. Be entrepreneurial in your mindset, and amazing things should hopefully happen. Have I missed anything?
No, all good.
Awesome. Hey, listen, thank you so much for joining us this week. If you would like to connect with us, do so on social media. You're at...
I am...
I didn't realize this would be such a tricky question.
I am Southern...
Are you sure?
On Instagram. And Southern Fainan on LinkedIn.
Yeah. I'm just at Matt Edmondson on both. I just went the easy route. So come find me. Or genuinely let us know what you like about the show, what you don't like. We always like feedback. Do be kind with your feedback, but be, honest. Honest but kind. That sounds like a really good chocolate brand. Honest but kind. Or a skincare brand. There you go.
Skincare, yeah.
Yeah, I've
not
set up a
chocolate.
skincare brand, not chocolate skincare. Honest but kind. Anyway, thank you so much for joining us. Connect with us, let us know. And as I said at the start, if you haven't done so already, just make sure you like and subscribe and do all of that good stuff. Because, we've got more great conversations coming up. Another one with Mark, episode 57, which we don't want you to miss. Then I take it episode 58 is going to be the full interview, which you are definitely going to want to check out. So do come join us for that. But until then, that's it from me. That's it from you.
Yep.
Are you sure?
I am sure.
Okay. All right. Bye for now.
And that brings us to the end of today's episode at Pod Junction. If you've enjoyed the insights from this episode and want to hear the full conversation with today's special guest, don't forget to visit podjunction.com, where you'll find more information about how you can join Pod Junction cohort. Whether you listened while on the go or in a quiet moment, thank you for letting us be a part of your day. Remember, every episode is a chance to gain insights and to transform your business with podcasting. So keep on tuning in, keep on learning, and until next time, happy podcasting.